Welcome to Laplink Connections. Today I'm talking with Patrick Husting, who is a serial entrepreneur, or perhaps I should better say entrepreneurial product creator, because over his life he created a lot of stuff. Hi, Patrick. How are you?
Hey, I am well. Thank you.
Well, Patrick, throughout your career, you have developed numerous software applications. Could you share a few apps that hold special significance to you or have intriguing stories behind the creation?
Yeah, everything that I've ever created is very personal to me, right? And that's just the kind of the way it is. That's how something starts. And so I think the one that holds my heart the most is the very first thing I ever created. And that's when I came right out of college and I was living on an airplane working for Honeywell, flying around the world. So I had a lot of time in hotels and airports and on planes. And I loved basketball. I played basketball very competitively as a young man. And I ended up creating a program called the Assistant Basketball Coach that was used used in high schools and colleges and some pro teams during the 90s until I had that for, I don't know, about 6-7 years. And I sold that to a company called E-Teams, which ultimately became the Active Network that's still around today, which is pretty amazing. But that was a lot of fun because I got to hang around athletes and go to different colleges and be in basketball gyms. It was just a blast recording stats. At that time, it was, on laptops. But, like all ideas, they can be very personal to you and be bad ideas. And so I've had my share of really bad ideas, right?
Well, I think that comes with the territory.
Yeah.
Not every idea, carries. And we see that so much in the industry that there are successful companies that do the same product that another company did 3 years ago and it was not successful. So
we'll see. It's always kind of like a new coat of paint, right? There's no new software. There's just a new interaction with it and a new UI on it.
Yeah. Well, talking about the present, you created Ghostwriter. So a new software enabling users to easily leverage the power of AI in their everyday tasks. Could you shed some light on the inspiration behind the development?
Sure. Several years ago, actually 6 years ago, I got horses, which you can see them in the background here. And I created an app, for managing horses. And it's basically a journal, healthcare activities app it's called the Equestrian app. And because of that, we had a change in my lifestyle, my wife and I, and really everything kind of revolves around them, after the kids are out of the house. And I was doing some horse or health related subjects on this Clydesdale here. Those beautiful white legs that you see there, they have a genetic disease that they can get. And I was just trying to understand it because I've only had that Clydesdale about 6 months now. And I just wanted to understand it so I could take care of her better and give her better, minerals and hay and vitamins, etc. And everything I Googled, I couldn't understand it, right? It's very medical. There's 30 different links. Half of them are ads, or you click through and it's just something that wasn't real, right? It was just kind of a bull article. So one day I decided I've been using ChatGPT in my programming already, or actually GPT-3, back in October last year. And ChatGPT just came out. So I asked ChatGPT that question if it knew what it was, and it did know what it was. And it came back and I went, oh, that's interesting. But I still didn't understand it because it was very medical. So then I said, explain it like I'm 12 years old. And it did. And I went, oh, wow, okay, I can take care of that. But then what was happening as I was doing research subject on all those horses is I was just copying and pasting constantly, really kind of into Word or even into Outlook. And then, when you copy paste anything from the web browser, what happens? Reformat. And I was getting so annoyed with it that I just thought this would be a great place to have it inside Office. And this is before Microsoft announced anything. This is before, their OpenAI relationship. And so I spent literally a month and a half trying to force this into the Microsoft Office task pane. And you're being an old Microsoft guy. Whoever designed that task pane as it exists today should be fired, because the design out of it is just terrible. So it took me a while to get through that, and it is very limiting in its functionality. So by the time I got it to work from a basic standpoint and I put it out there, I asked GeekWire if they would be interested in writing about it, even though I'm an independent developer. And I released it. Microsoft actually approved it in their add-in store. I was kind of wondering if they would, right? Because, they're formulating something. And they did, and GeekWire wrote about it, and it just blew up around the world.
Yeah, that is so cool. And again, it starts out with a hobby. Yeah, and now, of course, you have the background, but it starts out with a hobby, with the horses, and suddenly it totally takes a twist. And, off you go in the new world. I must say, I love the picture of your horse. I didn't have much horse relationships. I started to train for polo, playing polo in Europe and Argentina, but I was never really in the game. I was more training for it. But because in Europe, you don't have the, the place, you need a lot of money and opportunity to do that. So I never really got into that. But going back to Ghostwriter, so does it primarily focus on enhancing our daily lives rather than being geared towards technology, national defense, or similar areas?
Yeah. Well, it's a fascinating adventure. I have to admit, Thomas, this is one of the most fun things I've created. And I've never had this kind of, like my equestrian app. It is the #1 app for managing horses. There's over 50,000 horses in the system. There's 44,000 users of it today. There's lots of polo players that use it. There's Olympians that use it. There's a sheik out of Dubai with 150 racing camels that uses it. It's a fun app. Yeah, I've been to New Zealand and Australia on customer rides. It's a lot of fun. This add-in, though, it's hard to describe the impact that it's making on individuals' lives, on how they use it. We all create content every day, and we all kind of just stare at the screen. Well, what am I going to write? Writer's block. And I would say my first 2 months, I received a lot of emails about people wanting it to write an entire book for them, which is hilarious.
Yeah.
But ultimately, it does a great job on unlocking some creativity and allowing you, I think, to take another step. So I think the fun out of it is, creating the software. I've done 65 iterations of the software and released it in a little over 4 months now. It's almost like an update every 3 days. So I've learned a lot, but I learned a lot from the thousands of emails that I've received from people all around the world in all different languages. To make it better. So it's just a blast to interact with people. And I think the most fun is I never sold one software license into the country of China ever until this add-in.
Until this, yeah.
Yeah. And, they have the great digital firewall around China, as you know, and it's really hard to sell software there, if any, and OpenAI is blocked there. And, but I've got probably 300 college professors in China that use it, and they use VPN software to exit the country to go to another country to get to the OpenAI servers. So it's a blast that it opens up opportunities for people. It, breaks that writer's block that I like, and I like seeing the impact that it makes. It's such a simple app or add-in. But it's
but powerful, and changes lives.
Yeah, it's fun. It's different.
Now, when we use the term AI or artificial intelligence here at Laplink, we prefer to refer to it as simulated intelligence. What is your perspective on that? And do you foresee the emergence of real intelligence? That's always, where it really has brain, real intelligence from computers, such as general AI with self-awareness. Is that coming?
Well, hype sells ads and clicks. So I see a lot of that. I think my first 4 months of using it personally, and then, the first month into having the ad in, I always kind of said to myself, this is not going to replace anybody. It's going to augment what they do. Right? It's going to be like the Borg in Star Trek, right? We're going to be augmented with a device on us, and it's going to help us do things better, faster, cheaper, which it completely does. But now when I see, when I listen to a lot of the experts, from Google or OpenAI, even within Amazon and Meta, some of the things they say kind of freak me out, in regards to what it can do. And one of those things was from Google. If you remember, 5-6 years ago, they had their Google developer conference, and they showed this demonstration of AI software that would basically call a Chinese food restaurant for you using its own voice, place the order, close the order, and done. And the person on the other line had no idea. It was they recorded it, but that person on the other end didn't know that. And that was I think that was like 5 years ago. And then nothing ever came of it, but just recently, one of the builders of that software released that it freaked them out so much that they parked it right at Google. Can you imagine parking technology like that?
Yeah.
But it was so scary to them. And today, when I look at all the big tech companies doing it, they're all racing full steam ahead. I don't give a crap. We're going to do whatever we're going to do to get that market share. And so, Google's unlocked that beast itself, right? And OpenAI is doing their stuff. And I don't say Microsoft. I really say it's OpenAI, right? It's their tech.
Yeah.
And then Meta's got their stuff. They put out Lambda, open source. And then I think the beauty of all this is the open source movement, because they're moving faster than the big tech companies are, right? They took the $100 million processing down to $200,000 of processing. So there's going to be good people out there. I like to think I'm using AI for good and doing the right thing, which is the vast majority. But there's going to be bad people out there, and nation states that will use it for bad. Now, will it become sentient? I don't know. But if you've seen the Auto GPT, where it's a task base and so it communicates between two. Yeah, it freaks me out now. I'm freaked out by it. Is it going to eliminate us in 5 years? I don't think so. But will people use it for bad? Yes.
Yeah, and I mean that's the big discussion. I mean, I had myself exchange with some university people because they said, well, what becomes of copyright? And if you suddenly write term papers, your book, your dissertation, what's yours? What's artificial intelligence, and can you, detect that? But more, the morality of the side. And it was funny. A friend of mine just said, I wish they would put more money into real intelligence, into people versus artificial. But I think we have a considerable discussion about the potential dangers. Yeah, of course, now with the elections coming, ranging from misinformation or to doomsday scenario. Yeah. What's the thought on this matter? Do you believe that there's a need for increased regulation because beyond the existing ones?
I would love to see big tech companies be regulated. Why is OpenAI, why is Sam Altman running around the world right now talking so heavily about, AI? Is he wants that regulation, because that builds his moat, right? And that makes it harder for others to get in there. It's kind of like big banks. Right, we have our 5 big banks, and There's huge regulations on banks, so the smaller banks can't compete because it's not cost effective, with all those regulations. You mentioned the copyright piece of it. I struggle with that because I use this AI all the time. I have it write stuff. I take it, I search it to see if it exists. The words don't exist. Now, did they change one word in that phrase or something like that? I have no idea, but there's a temperature setting in the AI that you set. The closer to 0, the more boring or factual it is. The closer to 1 it is, the more crazy the AI says stuff. One of my test scenarios was write me a brief history of the state of Washington, right, where we live. And when I would have it 6 and below, or 0.6 and below, it would be very factual. If you went above that, Joe Biden was the governor of our state. And I was like, wow. And it sounded so real. So when you talk about the elections and the things that it can write and do, again, it's in the human heart. It's not the technology that is making it bad. It's the human being. We need intelligence in the humans, not to use it for bad. And can you regulate that? How do you regulate it? Everybody's got access to it.
Well, I mean, the government has not shown that they're always the forerunner for regulation and getting it right. Yeah, especially when it comes to deep technology. So perhaps, some of the organizations do have, like, the big companies have to, put something forward. But, when I was thinking about copyright, of course, you remember, read any novel. Oh, I would like to thank my editor. Yeah, the editor changed. Yeah, not only words, but perhaps your flow. Yeah, but they never make it on the cover. Yeah. And I think my wife for always, correcting stuff. Yeah. So, I mean, it's a little bit like a group effort. Now, the main idea and all the most writing is from the author. But I mean, that's where it starts. But where the really danger probably comes in is misinformation, because, and that can be political, they're discussing that. But when you think of medical, you perhaps want to look something up about the horses, but somebody wants to look something up about themselves. So they're self-medicating or self-behavior, from AI. And, where does that lead?
Well, medical's an interesting one, right? There's already been studies on that, on how much more accurate the AI is than compared to a real doctor. And they've run this through hundreds of doctors, which is scary. And then it's also for the ability of doctors to communicate it in a heartfelt way. So if you had an issue or something like that, doctors tend to be really cold today because there's so many people. You and I are just a number. I'm number 50 and you're number 51 when you go to the hospital. And so when the doctor communicates, their communication is a bit rough. I have a Ghostwriter Medical Edition for Word, and it can assume different doctor types, if you will, like heart surgeon, if you will, or a general practitioner. But they use it to help their communication style, to be much softer and more caring. It's kind of hilarious, but that's a great way to augment yourself, to soften the message.
Oh yeah, and I mean, that's where it really shows its usefulness, is to say, well, how does it change my communication to the better? Yeah, especially when it comes from either technical, medical, fields that we usually don't understand. And I mean, the medical personnel has become better. When I grew up, it was, shut up, I'm the doctor, just listen to me. Yeah? Today we can even say, well, is that right? Yeah. So there are changes. But you're right. I mean, there's so much hype right now. It's a little bit like the internet in the 90s when we started, and there were the doomsayer who said, oh, don't do the internet, it will lead to bad things. Now it's AI will lead to bad thing. And some companies thrived with it, some people got left behind. So looking at what do you foresee in terms of AI adoption and its future impact? How far have we really come, and where are we headed?
Well, like you, I've seen all these major technology advances, right? We started with the PC, and then we went to the internet, and then we went internet 2, and then the mobile phones. It's fascinating to see where it is. I think AI, we're 1% there. Right? We're at the early stages of something that's going to grow, forever. It's the weird part is the speed of it, right? And so I launched on February 1st, and on February 1st there was GPT-3 that was kind of publicly available at the time, and it was slow and very limited. And then after the $1 billion Microsoft deal with OpenAI, 3.5 became available about 40 days later, through the API service. And then that was amazing. And then about 4 weeks after that, GPT-4 came, and it was even more amazing with the amount that it could generate. It's terrible because it's so slow compared to the first or 3.5 version of GPT. So there's not going to be a GPT-5 because we just don't have the processing power, the GPU availability to do something even bigger, that's out there. So what I kind of foresee is we're just going to verticalize these models, right? There's going to be a legal edition, there's going to be a medical edition, there's going to be a consulting edition. You can kind of see the programming edition, right? Copilot and GitHub and Visual Studio. That's shocking. You might remember the methodology extreme programming, where you had two programmers working together, and basically they both on the same screen working the same problem. And they worked very quickly. I always kind of love that model. Well, that's what the AI is today, except it's like 4 or 5 people working with you. It's from a marketing perspective, I use it a lot, to create a lot of the marketing content that I have to create. I use it from a programming perspective. I do consulting to some law firms today, and I've used it to create my services contract, and they never said anything. They said, perfect, contract looks great. It's going to have a fundamental effect on people that create content. It's going to affect the legal industry. It's going to affect the marketing industry. They say the accounting industry is going to be upset quite a bit by it. I think all the white collar positions, if you will, the people that make $100,000 and up, if you don't adopt it, you're going to get left behind.
Yeah, I think everybody has to deal with it. Let's say, either say I want to move away from it and do more, original stuff, or embrace it. And it depends on, how the industry will work, whether you are a little bit left behind. But we had that with everything. We had it with the PC, creating totally different jobs. We had it with the internet, creating different jobs. But you said an interesting thing about, the speed. Now we can say that, okay, technology will solve that. Servers get bigger, data centers, blah, blah, blah. But I wonder also whether AI has to come down to the edge, because, our data centers, are pretty maxed out. Now we have quantum computing that can change everything.
Yeah.
But when you think that we also have, a billion PCs around that today have tremendous computing power. And the chips are getting better and better from Intel, AMD, and others. But when I just see also how quick Intel right now is releasing new generations. I mean, we are now in 13th generation, and we started out with the 8086, and it took a lot of time. Now it's very rampant. And I think we probably have to look at how we can do some of the computing power, especially with data that we have, our private data, that computes on your PC and not sends it out to the cloud where billions of people are using it. So that will be an interesting question.
No, you're exactly right. So it will go to edge computing, and it's going to be forced there because of privacy. So a large majority of my customers, of course, are attorneys. And think about the terabytes of data that they have on their networks. And they do not want to put that into a prompt. They do not want that to go through Microsoft SharePoint up into the AI models. They do not want to put that into Google because that is private, information. Microsoft, Google, Amazon, Meta want that because they will formulate a new line of business in the future, right? So there could be the Microsoft attorney someday, right? With enough data that goes in. So those private models is really where the future is. And that's where a lot of the open source movement has been going. So the $100 million in processing at the big data centers that we talked about earlier, now it's down to $200,000 creating the same OpenAI model, which is amazing, right? It's kind of mind-blowing. But could it, process down to the phone or on the tablet or in a server in your home thing? I wanted to. There's one called Private GPT that you can point it to a folder of documents and it will index it all and allow you to talk to it like ChatGPT. So you could feed it all your documents that you have in your home server and do that. You're going to need more processing power. It's horribly slow, but it's possible. I think the part that if we open our minds on this is if they allow the AI to talk to the AI to make it more performant so that it could do its own processing quicker, then it will happen. And you might be aware because your background from the Microsoft days, but in their research center, they had an AI project going on where they allowed two AIs to communicate to each other, and it was doing it in a natural language way, but it was really slow. So they basically just opened it up and it wrote its own language to communicate to each other, and it's just going blinding speed, and somebody pulled the plug because they didn't know what the heck was going on.
Yeah. Oh,
right?
Yeah. No. And that's where we go into, that's real AI. Suddenly, when they write the software to communicate, we don't know what's going on. That's sometimes a little bit the doomsday scenario.
And that's happening today.
Yeah. Well, I can also see, systems where you analyze your private data, but you don't have all the answers. And so your private ChatGPT will ask the general ChatGPT, I need some additional data from you, and feed it together. And that creates, a new way to look at it. So, I think you are absolutely right. We're at the beginning. And as always, we look in the, hindsight mirror and say, well, how should the future be? But, we don't know it all. If we would know it, it would be all better. But it's an amazing development that we only see every 20 years, where we had it with the PC, we had it with the internet. I'm sure there are a couple other things, the whole cloud situation, although I always think that it's a little bit like server client. It's just more servers in the in the web. Now it's called the cloud. But it's
bigger ISP.
yeah, much bigger. And of course, we have to look at sustainability on that stuff, energy consumption, and so on. So there are a lot of problems we have that we solve, and we can solve with new technology. So, well, it was great talking to you, Patrick.
It was a lot of fun.
Looking forward to seeing your next products. And, certainly we can always use help in doing our work or our life better. And so that's where we need people who, think about how they can make it better. So thank you very much.
Yeah.
And,
goodbye
think for now. Go ahead.
I think for the people that watch this who haven't tried any of the AI technologies, I just recommend going to chat.openai.com and typing in a simple question, very personal to you, and seeing what that response is. And then ask it, to respond in a different writing style, maybe a favorite author that you have, or have it respond in a tone that is friendly or creative, and see what it does. And that will be your first try into it. And I think once you see some of that, then it breaks these barriers, because I think in the news we hear a lot of hype today.
Yeah.
But you have to experiment it and personally feel the effects of it. And I think over time it'll be transformational. So I appreciate the time.
Yeah, no, it was great, and perhaps we'll talk next year and see where we are. Then we will see how quickly it changed. But all the best to you. Thank you very much for your time, and talk to you soon.
Thank you.